Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Silly Chrysovcast. Now, in this episode, we have on the pack team my friend Sean Revan, Hubis, and Argle with myself, and on NATO, a random pickup group of pubbies. Now, for this match, what ends up happening is that we, in the Red 4 team, quickly attack and establish dominance over Juliet and Echo, which then allows us to just simply move in and crush Lima. Now, we'll obviously see the specifics of that later, and I'd just like to take the moment to talk about the map of Stavanger itself while they're loading up. I find that this map is a bit asymmetrical in terms of its overall strategic importance. For instance, on the left here, along the Golf Hotel Kilo axis, it's entirely possible for one player to hold on to this one section here by themselves, because this section and this path here are both very constricted terrains, which allows for a defensive player to hold off even two enemy players, just simply because of the constricted terrain allows for napalm, artillery fire, and limited defensive forces to actually hold onto the position quite well. And in addition to that, if you actually have a player that is attacking from Juliet into Charlie, then it means that there's no pressure or method of which somebody could attack Kilo, so there's no point in holding any significant force in Kilo or around this section here, because if you're exerting pressure along here and have a defense along here, then that means that you have now two players that are free to either push into Delta or into Echo. And out of the two, I'd say that actually taking Echo is the first thing that you should do before taking Delta, because that allows you to form a 90-degree rule attack, where you're attacking from one side and from the front as well. And on from the Red 4 team, you can see that things are a little bit different. Now, you want to get Juliet as much as possible, because it means that you can do that 90-degree rule attack on Lima, and it also means that the defenses in Echo can basically be stripped and used to attack. And that's also, of course, assuming that Delta's been successful and is holding this position here. And this is actually what ends up happening in this match in the Red 4 team. And also, by taking Juliet, it means that any enemy forces that are at the India end of the map are unable to effectively support their fellows in Lima, as this entire supply route along the coast is cut off. Of course, what we see here in Delta at the start is some initial napalms which miss my forces, but I proceed to send them through the forest, which then gets them a bit bogged down, but ends up not being much of a difference, because hey, when you send light helicopter infantry against some heavy tank forces, well, we know how that song and dance goes. Now, in this match, we had myself attacking into Delta, and Sean Revan, who was attacking into Echo, with the plan of us pincering into this area here, while Hubis had taken Charlie and was pushing hard on Juliet to make it so that he didn't really need to bother with the defense so much. And Argle was on our right flank, defending this area here, and trying to kind of push and put on a little bit of pressure. Light rifleman getting taken out by a flame tank, and unfortunately I didn't move my cubs forward enough, so my troops end up eating a bomber, and whilst I don't take much in the way of damage in that strike, everything ends up panicked from that attack, and it just really screws my forward momentum in this early stage of the game. And the constant Lars fire from Black Winter is a real pain in the ass. However, as we can see here, very limited defensive forces. I'm not going to have much difficulty in actually clearing out Delta once I get rolling. Now, rather than trying to get it stuck into a annoying clusterfuck of fighting in the forest with sappers, Spetsnaz and what have you, I've instead actually set up a defensive line here with Motorschützen and BMP-1Ps as a sort of trigger warning area, a tripwire, so that if any enemy troops try to cross this area, they'll get attacked and shot at, and I'll be notified of as to what's going on, and I can move fresh reserves in quite quickly from here to counter any sort of push. This means that I can actually go a little bit lighter on my infantry component, which is quite valuable, as this is an armoured East German deck, so I'm actually a little bit low on infantry on this map, in this deck. I only have 2 cards of Motorschutz and a card of Panzerjägers, which I actually end up using for quite effectively later on. So as we can see here, Sean Revan has taken Echo pretty much unopposed, which means that he's pretty much free to support either me or Hubis in Juliet, and Hubis has effectively gotten his troops into Juliet itself, which is quite handy because it means that this entire way of moving in, this is a lot more feasible, because what usually happens is that the enemy rushes into Julius, the red moves into Charlie, and there's this huge no man's land along here, and here be dragons as well, which ends up being a real big problem for when you're trying to attack. However, by initially getting these forward positions that are held by him, it means it establishes a foothold of which makes further attacking more possible. And Shan just decides to throw forward a hero BTR 60 that proceeds to go around and shoot some dudes. It's always amusing how just sometimes randomly throwing a unit down the road can work out quite well. So here I am moving up some fresh troops as my units are still a bit beaten up from all the air support that they've been suffering from, and a Cobra is also coming in, which is usually a good way of countering a push such as mine, where I'm going a little bit raggedly and my anti-air cover has been stripped away somewhat. However, of course, the solution to that problem is always a quickly called in jet, which then proceeds to shoot down the AH-1E. In this case, a MiG-29. Where is he? There he is. And yeah, he shoots that guy down. 'Cause fuck helicopters. So here we see just simply a nice little push where... Ooh, and I also shot down an Alpha jet in the same run. Hero MiG-29, evidently. And this Phantom misses the Motorschützen and only hits some T-72 M1s that proceed to just kind of move outside of the flame area to little effect. Now this is why I really like having a lot of tanks around, is because these T-72 M1s are killing these starships before they can have any sort of real impact, and they also provided a lot of good fire on the light riflemen and infantry that was in this area, allowing my troops to move in with low casualties. Like, I've only taken a single I've only lost 2 Motorschützen in the past couple of minutes, which is quite fantastic. Oh, and we just lost 2 more. Oh well, plenty more Kameraden from where they come from. Now, Hubis's little foothold here is kind of on the ropes. However, he's also doing an attack... Oh, no, it's Argelbargel who's making an attack into Gulf, which is quite unconventional because most people would actually push on Hotel instead of Gulf, but since attacking into Hotel is a fool's proposition, because you can just look at this and just think, look, there's no way in hell that you're able to make any sort of headway into an attack like that, because the enemy can just keep stacks of infantry in this city and just keep moving another 4 stack of them up forward every time you take out 1 block. It's just an absolute meat grinder, and it's impossible to do. And when you consider that the difference in the supply lines from just here to there, from there to here, it's just not beatable. However, attacking into Gulf is usually a lot less defended and can often make some surprising headway. And Hubis has somewhat restored his foothold into Juliet with the application of helicopters and some fresh tanks and a BMPT. Now, we've completely crushed the enemy in Delta, and just because I've been distracted a lot at this time, I've unfortunately neglected to take a command vehicle into the position, but I quickly get that up soon, and it ends up not really making much of a difference anyway. Because when the ticket bleed is only +1 point, you can actually kind of weather that for a bit and not have to really get onto it immediately. Especially if you're doing what I'm trying to do, which is try and push forward as fast as possible while I've still got the opening initiative of the battle. And these rangers are about to get killed off by some vehicles that they can't do anything about because they ran out of Carl Gustavs. Hero MiG-29 once again taking out a jet and an AH-1, sorry, in one attack run. And, oh, taken out by the Hawk. You'll get yours, cunt. So Black Winter in Lehman decides to try and get into the forest fighting shitfest gambit for this area, because that can be often what happens, is that this area here becomes the main focus of the battle for Lima, which of course heavily favours the defender because of that shortened supply line versus this one here. So fortunately, however, we managed to beat him quite solidly and exert enough pressure to force the battle to occur around here, which is much more favourable to us. And also around this time, as you just noticed, Argle unfortunately dropped because lol Chinese internet, and so my friend Sean Revan instead got his units, and that's a bit of a problem because it means that now he's got his attention split all the way over here to here. So just so you know, I've noticed that it's often actually the host that actually inherits the units of somebody who drops instead of anyone else. So it's kind of like if you're in a match where there's players 1, 2, 3 and 4 and player 3 drops, they'll go to player 1. So keep that in mind when it comes to assigning sectors if you're playing with people who happen to be a bit hazy on their internet at the time. Christ, I still haven't moved a command vehicle into Delta. But since we've kicked them off Juliet, well, it doesn't really matter from that point. So now, at the moment, we have this situation where Gulf is being pushed on the right. The forces in Kilo are somewhat bottled up, and so are the forces in Hotel, which means that the main fight now is in Lima, which is completely cut off from everyone else. So me and Sean focus upon crushing this small pocket of forces. Ah, there's the command tank, finally. So, whilst this push onto Gulf has stalled somewhat, it still has done the very important thing of ensuring that they actually have a path into this hilly, wooded area around here, which is usually hugely in favour of the defender. So it means that by breaking that first barrier, further movement in this area is much more possible. However, the Blue 4 players don't really put much focus into trying to counter the pushes in this area, instead trying to bottle themselves up into their zones themselves. An example of fortress thinking, which doesn't really work out. Now, some M48s take on some Sappery, who proceed to basically run down their fuel supplies, panic them, kill a command jeep which was sneaking around there for some reason, and otherwise just be pests. So I'm moving in some Mörserschützen to help out the Sappery, and I also move up a T-72 M1 later. LTPV shrugs off a 2A46 hit, seems legit. So attacking into Lima, on the face of it, seems like a very hard proposition, because you see this area here, very constricted, obviously constricted here, absolute meat grinder. So how is it that one would attack into this area? The answer, of course, is a lot of smoke, ideally, and a lot of artillery support, either tubes or rocket artillery, or hopefully both, because what you should be using is heavy mortars and heavy guns to pick off individual units such as Hawks or ATGM positions, and then using rocket artillery to stun entire defensive zones and making them useless. Because whilst this open area is great for the defender for establishing like area denial with ATGMs as an example, it also means that there's far less areas in which they can hide their troops on the defensive. So it's pretty obvious where they have to go, and it means that picking your targets with your artillery support is much more easier to do. So I'm just going to zoom out and speed things up a little. Because sometimes it's quite handy to just zoom out to this level of a replay and then just simply see how the flow of the battle proceeds. Because here is where you can get a good sense of how do units move around when you're calling in reinforcements, how long does it take them, and just simply the general weight of the units involved. As you can see, there's a hell of a lot of concentration around here, while things are a lot more scattered around in this sector for Red 4, while on Blue, very concentrated in certain points, but no real sort of continuous line. And so we somewhat win the forest fight, and unfortunately we missed where the Panzerjäger exact their toll, but they killed quite a few tanks, and I was pretty impressed with them by then. However, of course, Panzerjägers are somewhat of a very niche unit, because with only 500 meter range on their RPGs, they don't even have the extended range of, say, the S'mores. So, whilst they do have really high AP and high rate of fire, it's a bit of a sort of thing as to their overall usefulness. However, from what I've been told, in a reverse slope defense, they're pretty much unbeatable. So, yeah, good for defensive players. But I prefer to have more motor shots in general. So, here we've got some mortars firing into Lima, because since Lima, like I said, is just so open, it means that we can pretty solidly guess and work out where the enemy defensive units are. And we also get some counter battery on those damnable Lars. And oh, there was my rocket artillery firing, my mad favourites, the RM70s, which has gotten a little bit of suppression happening, especially on these Leopard 2A1s. So now my T-72s are able to move in actually pretty unmolested. And even against these infantry positions here, my T-72s don't take much in the way of fire. These MBT-70s don't really do much in the way of damage, as I said, because hey, panicked and stunned, and just unable to hit anything, or shoot fast enough. Missed the Vulcans, but you know, we're not really making use of air support or helicopters in this attack, so it's a bit of a who cares. And here we had where I've spotted some more Leopards, that my first rocket strike wasn't very effective, but it has meant that the units around them are now panicked as well. So this continual rain of rockets is a great way of disrupting enemy counters to what you're deploying, because it means that, say for example these Leopard 1A4s, they're already at a pretty messed up state before their attack is even launched. And here we see an example of why attacking into Lima is quite dangerous, because those two Lars have actually stunned and panicked the majority of my forces here. However, luckily, I have a fresh unit of T-72s moving up here, and so has Shan has some of his own forces moving into support as well. Because in a battle which is actually determined mostly by morale and organisation instead of, say, raw strength, just happen to have a solid core of backup units that you have ready to go, a reserve of high morale troops to throw into the battle once everyone else has become panicked, including your enemy, is often the decider of which allows you to keep pushing. In this case, we've kind of slowed down where our battle ball is over here and the enemy's is here. Rocket artillery once again comes in to make the defenders less than capable. And I also send the units which I have in this sector just forward, just simply to exert pressure from a different direction. They don't achieve much, but hey, misdirection. And again, look at that, look at those panics. With only a single Leopard 2A1 really doing much in the way of actually shooting at things. And I'm making quite good use of my mortars in this attack to pick off lighter units, including these command vehicles that we spot. Which is quite important for when making a push like this, as the sooner you can eliminate the enemy command vehicles, the sooner they have their reinforcements cut off and you can just focus on mopping up at your own pace. And those lucky Lars somehow not die to that mortar barrage. The charge of the heavy tank brigade, I guess. Now, being a little concerned about my anti-air cover, I move up a Strela 10M and Sean moves up a Tunguska, which will hopefully give us some measure of protection from a last-ditch helicopter or air rush. Not a whole lot, but hey, better than nothing. And these cubs, which I'd positioned on this hilltop here to cover this area around here, have already expended all their missiles, and somehow haven't died to that prowler. Quite fortunate for me. Now Sean also throws his troops in an attempt to take this area here, which would then also cut off the reinforcements, but mortar fire has already knocked out the command vehicle here, so now it's just simply a case of sealing this pocket up with our forces. So Leopard 2A1s were, just before that mortar barrage, at a calm state, getting some shots off, but quick reaction mortars drops enough HE on them to panic them, and now, well, they're probably not going to fire off even a single shell before they die. And rocket artillery doing some more distributed wide area destruction. On this point, I'd like to note, if you haven't already, on the main forums, I've actually written a few guides, and one of the things that I've actually written about is the 3 pillars of force: strength, morale, and organisation. If you haven't given it a read yet, I suggest you do. It more concretely lays out the concepts of which I've been saying for a couple of videos now about how just killing the enemy isn't the be-all end-all of how to take them apart. You also need to attack the intangibles of morale and organisation to truly have an effective attack or defence. So since this area is pretty much done and dusted, let's speed things up. The luckiest Lars to ever live. Until the T-72s come, that is. And so at this point, the battle's pretty solidly decided. Whilst we were crushing the pocket in Lima, Hubis launches his attack on Kilo and seems to have cleared it out pretty well. So at this point we could have sat back and just simply let the points income come in, but we decided to have a little bit more fun and just crush the last pockets of resistance Soviet Army style. And this little picket force, oddly enough, along here, ends up actually doing its job in killing these assault engineers before they can do anything. Points well spent. Kenny Loggins fan club, flying around. And finally the command vehicle in Golf dies. And of course around that alarm we kind of debated around ourselves and we're like, alright, let's get our command vehicles off our zones just simply so we can keep having fun with this rare situation. Because one of the things I do admit I occasionally miss from Total Destruction is those occasional games where you've crushed your enemies before you and it's just that final zone that you need to just squeeze down. And unfortunately for these zones, such as India, there's not really much fighting that you see in them when in a conquest match. Just simply because everything's usually decided around this area of the map instead. Ooh, phone call. Bloody phone calls, and we destroy the last enemy command vehicle. Thank you, and I'll be uploading another video soon, and yeah, see ya.